Hi and welcome to part 2 of the Textured Long Cuff Handwarmers. Right, we are working now at round 10, just demonstrating getting ready to close up the thumb area of your handwarmer. And just reminding you, US terms are used in this video. Patterns are available in UK and US terms. Right, so we're doing that last cluster, 1 double crochet, our second double crochet, drawing through only to 2 loops, then yarn over hook and pull right through. Now we're just going to slip stitch. We are not going to put a chain between these two. We're going to turn our work and we're going to slip stitch into the top of that first cluster. Okay, and then we're going to begin in round 11. It'll be a 3 chain half cluster round. So we begin the half cluster, then we begin our full cluster, which is your 2 double crochet straddled over the cluster below, 1 chain between, 1 double crochet, draw through 2 loops, 1 double crochet, draw through 2 loops, draw through all loops, and you can see there what we're going to be doing is we'll be creating our first cluster. We'll actually straddle over the split we created, or the opening for the thumb. So continue around the round, and when we get to this point, we've got 1 more cluster sitting there and 1 on the other side, but we've started our half cluster with our 3 chains. So what we're going to do is 1 chain, do our 1 double crochet part, draw through 2 loops, and then we're going to go across to our 3 chain and slip stitch as we've done before to join these rounds that start with the 3 chain half cluster. So drawing right through, and you'll see there that that cluster is sitting over the thumb opening. Right, round 12 is again 3 chain, turn your work. You will complete this round as you did before, ending round 12 and moving on to the ribbed top band. At this point, for all sizes, we'll be doing 5 chain, and depending on where you've ended, you may need to turn your work. It's important that you are facing the right side of your work to begin and continue this ribbed area. 1 single crochet into the second chain from the hook of the 5 chain there, and then we're going to start our yarn over slip stitches into the remaining 3 chain. And our last little chain, just make sure that you have completed 1 single crochet, 3 yarn over slip stitch. So we will have 4 stitches we're working over. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look directly below the rows we've just done, or the row we've just done. There is a cluster. We are going to slip stitch into the top of that cluster, and then we are going to slip stitch into the chain gap right alongside. Now what this is doing is it's moving us across the work to make room for us to create our next 2 rows. Now turn your work anti-clockwise away from you. You want your yarn to be at the front of the work. Now we're going to start again. Yarn over slip stitch, but this time counting to our 4th stitch from the edge, back loop only. So just be sure that you're not crocheting into your slip stitches. They are simply moving you along to create the gap. So 3 yarn over slip stitch, back loop only, and as we did for the lower cuff, we're going to do 1 single crochet into the end to again create that slightly scalloped edge. After each single crochet, ensure that you chain 1 and turn your work the normal way, this time away from you, rolling it and having your yarn now behind the work, away from you. Right, beginning again, 1 single crochet, and you will do your 3 yarn over slip stitches through the back loop only. Yarn over your hook through the back loop, yarn over your hook, draw it through, and slip stitch through the 2 loops. Yarn over through the back loop, yarn over, pull through, and pull through, slip stitch your 2 loops. Now looking for your next cluster, we're going to slip stitch, and again work our way 2 slip stitches across, 1 in the top of the cluster and 1 into the chain gap. You'll then turn your work again, anti-clockwise, rolling away from you. Yarn at the front, counting 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. That's our first stitch we're working into. Yarn over, back loop, slip stitch, back loop, and you'll work all the way around until you get to the other side. So once you've reached that area, we'll just show you the last couple of stitches. So we've got 1 more cluster and chain gap that we'll be slip stitching into. Turn your work anti-clockwise, yarn to the front, and complete your last 2 rows. Now you will have reduced your cluster count by 1, which gives this area a slightly smaller fit in accordance with the shaping of a hand. At the end, our last yarn over slip stitch, we're going to be putting the 2 sides together, pulling our loop through and doing the same technique of a no-sew seam, slip stitching each stitch from one side, slip stitching across the 4 stitches of our rib band and seaming this area. And once we get through to that last stitch, we will leave a reasonable sized tail. Just create like a chain there at the end, but all we're going to do is snip our thread and then pull that thread through. Great. So now we're moving on to, actually before we do that, let's just have a quick look at the seam. Yep, looks really great. Sits nicely. Now we're ready to do the thumb covering. Now this is optional. You may or may not want to have this area built up slightly, but you're going to rejoin with a slip knot, 1 chain to secure and 1 chain to start your round. And then you've been given a number of single crochets recommended for this opening. Now depending on how thick or thin your thumb is, I like to place a marker in that first stitch just so I don't get confused with that first chain. We're just going to go up to the top end, evenly working carefully over each of those rows and creating the single crochet count recommended. Now you may want to pop your glove on at that point and just check how the fit is. We are going to do 1 more round to complete the thumb opening. When you get round to the bottom, pop out your marker and we will slip stitch into that first area, chain 1 and continue around again, single crochet in each stitch. Now when we get to the end, we would normally slip stitch into this stitch. But instead of doing that, because the slip stitch leaves quite a distinctive knot, we're going to actually just work our way back just to that last stitch that we finished, popping our hook in, pull your yarn through, but don't tighten it. leave the stitch looking like the rest of them alongside. Now what we're going to do, thread our needle and going underneath the first stitch that we would normally slip stitch into, going right underneath, draw your thread through and then down into the stitch, the last stitch you finished with. So what we're doing in effect is creating exactly the same type of stitch with the needle. Now don't pull it too tightly, and as you can see, what we're creating there is a look where it will be invisible for someone to see exactly where you finished. So then after that, I just like to thread through a couple of stitches down away from the edge, and then I will knot it off just to secure it. Just make sure that your knot isn't sitting up in that top area. And then I do recommend that you then just do a normal weave through with that tail into your work. If we turn the work through to the wrong side, you will see the two threads, our starting thread and our finishing thread that needs to be woven in. So there you have it. That's a large I'm demonstrating. I've just popped on the medium to show you the fit around the thumb. That's your end product. Congratulations. Now to do your second item. If you haven't purchased this pattern, you're viewing this, the links to purchase are in the description. Thanks for joining me and happy crochet.